event. First event, we're working out the kinks. Before we begin, I'd like to ask how many Sourland Conservancy members are here tonight. Please raise your hands. And on Zoom, you can chat in. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your continued support of our work all year long. Members like you make all of our work possible, and we can't do it without you. Today, our stewardship staff reported that together we have planted and protected over 4,300 trees and shrubs in 2023. So that is a total of over 35,000 native trees and shrubs planted and protected in the Sourlands since our forest reforestation project began in 2020. We are continuing to plant this fall, and if you're not a member already, please consider supporting our work and help us spread the word. I'd also like to thank the Sourland Conservancy staff and other volunteers who plan and run our educational seminars and webinars. Please be sure to say hi on your way out. And finally, I'd like to thank the First Presbyterian Church of Titusville for opening your doors and welcoming us all. This is the first in-person and Zoom talk of the Sourland seminar. So here's how it goes. I will introduce our speaker. She will present for about an hour and then answer your questions. We are recording tonight's event, hopefully, so that we can share the presentation with those who couldn't join us. We will send a follow-up email with links to books, articles, and other details that Barbara might reference in her talk. Be sure to keep an eye out. There will also be a link in that email to a very short survey. We've heard from people that they're having trouble finding out about our events, so we want to know how you found us and hear suggestions about how we can improve overall. So thank you in advance. And now, without further ado, I will introduce tonight's speaker. Barbara is an author and illustrator of books for children. Her first picture book was Renato and the Lion, which received a starred review from Booklist and was named a Bank Street Best Book of the Year, a Junior Library Guild selection, and a CBC Notable Social Studies trade book for young people. She is also the author and illustrator of Quincy the Chameleon Who Couldn't Blend In, a finalist for the Crystal Kite Award. Her third book, One Thursday Afternoon, won the 2022 Spirituality and Practice Award. A Rhode Island School of Design graduate, she has taught drawing, painting, and illustration at the Arts Council of Princeton, the Princeton University Art Museum, and the James A. Michener Art Museum. She lives with her family in central New Jersey. Thank you, Barbara. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I know when there's an option to Zoom something, it's so appealing to want to stay home. So no offense to anyone who is actually at home watching this, but it's really great to see faces and that you guys actually have some art supplies and you want to do some sketching. That is really wonderful. So yeah, I'll just get right into it. This is my, oh geez, it's not working now. There we go. I don't have to linger on this slide much because you just introduced all of the things and these are the books that I did. So I will get right into what it is like to go out in nature and bring art supplies and possibly other people, if you have friends that you want to bring, family, little ones. Oh, I see a friend. Whatever you feel like bringing out into the woods, it is a little different than sketching in your home space. A lot of artists I work with have a nice setup in their kitchen, or if they're lucky enough to have a studio, they have a beautiful spot, everything gets to stay in its place. But when you are out and about, you are definitely contending with a lot of different factors. So I brought two groups out in anticipation of this talk just to kind of see what else I would be missing that I should mention to everybody. So this was the first outing. I brought a whole smattering of materials from things that I use regularly, and then some things that are my daughter's favorite materials, like the markers, and there's some colored pencils, and then someone gave me this watercolor set, so I was really happy to just sort of throw it all in a pile and bring this with. It was my 6-year-old daughter who loves to just do any art. It was my brother, who is an astrophysicist, so very scientific-oriented person, really does not ever draw or paint that I know of, but I thought it would be really interesting to introduce him to nature journaling to see what his take on it was, how observant he was, how detail-oriented he was. I brought my 20-year-old son, who is an art student, and my husband, who is happy to tag along and just goes with the flow and doesn't really draw that much, but is happy to do it. Anyway, so that was the group that went out the first time. So the list I have on here is pretty straightforward, but you know what? Actually, the materials I brought tonight, I forgot the third thing on here, which was the watercolors. I brought my paper, I brought my pencils and erasers and colored pencils, and I forgot my paint. So even though I made this list, it's easy to forget all these things. So definitely, you know, make sure you bring everything, because at least here the church was able to give me some extra materials, but out in the woods, you're kind of like, okay, I guess I'm not coloring this till I get home. One note before I go to the next slide, make sure you have water to paint with and water to drink from separately. It is not a good idea. Even if it's non-toxic paint, it is not a good idea to mix the two. That's probably very obvious to a lot of people, but I have done, I've done that by accident a few times. Actually, this is a picture from the second outing. This was my daughter and her friend. And I learned from the first group, I am comfortable sitting on the dirt. I'm fine with being out in nature and all the little critters that go with it. Not everybody was. So if you're bringing a lot of people with you, I suggest some kind of blanket or tarp or something just to kind of make that space a little bug-free, a little poison ivy free maybe. Hopefully avoid poison ivy completely. Definitely bring some kind of tick or bug repellent, sunscreen, and you know, a picnic is not a bad idea. You make a little day of it, and it's a fun thing to do. Okay. So this was my daughter, who's very much like me, very happy to just get into the dirt, even with nice clothes on. So depending on your relationship to dirt, bringing more or less items to keep you clean. She was actually just sitting on a bag, I think. The other thing I noticed, not something I've had happen to me too much, but maybe it's the 6-year-old, but she picked up a lot of dirt in her efforts to paint her picture. And I was like, oh, great. Now this new watercolor set is full of dirt. So bring something that you're okay with getting a little dirty. So when you're outside, it's a little overwhelming because you look out and you see so many things in every direction that would be amazing to paint. And you think, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to focus on any one thing. So I recommend just taking a moment to just take a deep breath, smell the beautiful smells around you, listen to the birds and the insects, really absorb the space that you're in, sit quietly, look around and see if there's a specimen near you that you are interested in. Look and see if there is, you know, you can also, with your camera, you can kind of sort of frame different things and see what you might want to tackle. That's another good way to isolate one component that you want to draw from. I also recommend taking pictures so that later when you go home, if you want to continue drawing, you have a sample of what you were looking at. So that's a good thing. Oh, and then I also added, try not to disturb the elements around you. I don't think I have to say that to this group. You guys are a pretty nature-oriented bunch, but that is worth noting with the little people maybe that you're bringing with you. Just remind them to kind of leave only footprints and not stomp on any delicate flowers. Okay, so when you look at a subject out in nature, it might be really hard to figure out how the heck am I going to draw this. These mushrooms are an example of this. A couple people in our first group drew these turkey tail mushrooms. I believe they're turkey tails. That's what I think they are. So it may look very complicated at first, but the thing that is important, whether you are drawing one single flower, or if you're drawing a whole bunch of mushrooms, or if you're drawing a whole big landscape, or a portrait, or anything else, looking at the big shapes first, really noticing not the like little texture and the little patterns and details and oh my gosh, they're all sort of on top of each other, but noticing that they are irregular and they kind of have this like bean or almost like an ear shape, some of these little guys. Noticing their colors, noticing the very delicate, subtle cream colors that are involved, maybe around the moss too. There's some deep green moss. There's so many things that if you stop and really observe, you're going to find interesting details. That's part of the reason why it's so great to go and paint and draw out in nature is it's a way to learn about those specimens. When we're walking on a hike, it's fun to look at those things, take a picture, but if you're really trying to draw something, you get to know it so much better, and you'll find really cool details that on first glance you wouldn't have seen. This is my daughter's take on the turkey tails, which I thought was pretty good for 6. I think she's an extraordinary young person, but I wouldn't say she, does a lot of drawing that turns out looking like what she intends it to look like yet. Totally normal for her age, but this surprised me. This actually kind of felt like she was really trying to observe those organic forms and find those creamy colors and some of the darker details. If you're with younger artists that don't quite have the dexterity yet to do what maybe you can do, just ask them about their picture, ask them to tell you what is happening in there, what they're looking at. Be curious about what they're doing and acknowledge their efforts and focus on their efforts, because that can really make them feel really proud of their work, and not really, focus on how realistic it looks in the end. This was my brother's drawing, which I thought was so funny. The astrophysicist, I was impressed that he had a very rendered picture of this wood piece that he found. And he made a little joke to himself up there. Gnarls Barkley is a musician, so he had gnarled Barkley. And then he had all these other observations, more scientific observations than my daughter, and just had, this list, which is wonderful. Anytime you want to write down traits about the thing that you're looking at to remind you later. Sometimes I do that, not related to nature drawing, but also in my own brainstorming sessions. If I'm trying to come up with a book character and I'm thinking of a plot, I will brainstorm this big messy page and I have to actually write notes to myself and say, this is actually a toaster. Like I forgot how to draw a toaster, this is a toaster. So write notes, write what you're looking at, what you're sensing, write about what's around you. All that stuff is great. And then this was my son, the son who goes to art school. I had expectations he would really focus in on a specimen and do this really great botanical drawing. And he drew his uncle, and then he drew the island across the way. And I was like, well, it's a good thing to remember that it's okay to depart from your goal too. If you want to draw a specimen and you get down to, water's edge and you see something else that you like, go for it. The most important thing is that you're out in nature, you are enjoying the space, you're enjoying your creativity. Whatever is in that direction is fine. So this is this is the whole bunch. Well, my husband is cut off of this, but they're sharing their artwork, and this was not staged. It looks staged. It was not staged. I think my brother, who's making that funny face, is the one that's like, well, I don't know about this. And my son, who's standing up, is the one that's like, no, 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 look at this. It is important to share with other people. I feel like many artists that I work with at the Arts Council of Princeton, I feel like, a lot of very skilled creative people hold on to their work and don't share it and don't really want to have the outside world connect with it out of fear that someone might sort of interpret it in a different way or not appreciate it, or someone might say something that feels critical. I think it's important to share with other creative people. If you can connect with other creative people or other nature lovers, I think they will understand a little bit better the direction you're coming from and have um, uh, there won't be as many comments that make you go, oh man. So there'll be, I think, a lot more joy. I think a lot more joy if you share it with other creative people. Um, and it's just fun. It's fun to share, like when you're out and about and you're all drawing more or less the same thing. It's fun to show your interpretation of whatever that was. My husband, I don't think his work made it into this, but he did the turkey tail mushrooms as well. And it was fun to see my daughters next to his and the way they observed differently, which was really cute. And this is my daughter with her friend. Uh, they're sharing their work, and they had written notes on their work too. Okay, so we're going to draw together, but I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk step by step through a drawing I did earlier just to show what this process drawing together is going to be like. And I found these pictures with the help of Alexandra and Roger up at the Foraging Forest in Hopewell. We found some native and some not native species, but the one that I focused on first is this cutleaf coneflower. And the very first sketch that I did was just focusing on these really big shapes. So the initial drawing is just a circle, and then some of these petal shapes are just kind of almondish shapes, nothing too detailed. I didn't start in the center and try to get all those little details first. I'm starting with the big shapes because if I make a mistake at this level, after spending maybe 30 seconds on the drawing, I can erase it and not feel so connected to it. If I render something so beautifully, but it's not quite proportional, then I'm going to feel very frustrated if I have to keep erasing. So stay with big shapes first. And then I just started to kind of find the concentric rings in the center of the flower to sort of figure out where everything should go. It's not quite lined up perfectly, but it's, you know, getting closer. Then I'm finding also the lines in the petals. And then there's no stem on this yet, but I started to find some of those details in the center. And I really got excited about all those little bits that are there. And then finally, I added some leaves and a stem. The way my camera was putting things out of focus, I didn't quite get a sense of if that stem in the background of the photo was the actual stem. So I made that part up. And then I used watercolors that I have at home to put a glaze of yellow down first over all the petals, over the center, and then I took a little green and I just dropped the green in just to give it a little connection with what I'm seeing in the photo, knowing that I'm going to go over it again with other colors as well. While I was waiting for that to dry, I went around and sort of found some of the cooler greens of the leaves. And in the photo, there's a lot more going on, but I wanted to isolate this flower as best I could. Another pass, I added a little bit darker value to the leaves and to the petals. I was looking at where the light was hitting the flower. And I started to build up those values a little bit. Now it's looking a little different than the photo, and that's okay. But I was trying to give a little more sense of detail. And then here I tried to put in some of the dark lines around the center components. In the end product, it doesn't look that different. I mean, it looks a little different than the photo, but it has elements that connect with it. And I think that's the important thing. When you go out and you paint out in a natural space, the spirit is observation, studying, getting to know that piece. And, you know, if you leave with some notes and something that looks kind of like the thing you're looking at, that's great. Okay, so this flower is the one I wanted to paint with you guys tonight, draw and paint. It has some elements that are similar to the other coneflower that are kind of simpler shapes in the petals. However, that center has a lot going on. So it's going to be fun to kind of look at that and break those shapes down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this a little bit smaller and then have a camera over what I'm doing so you can see me drawing and you can see the flower. But if anybody wants to take a picture of this before I switch over to making it kind of little, you're welcome to. If you want to come up and take a picture, it's okay. I want you to be able to get as much detail as you can. Give you guys a minute. Yeah, my experience, a lot of times people that take a picture of the source can then look at it a little bit closer on your phone, and it's a little easier. I don't think it's really that blue. Like here it's a little more purple, but you can have fun with the colors. And I said to some people before everybody was here, I meant to bring my big palette of watercolor paint, and I'm running through the checklist of all the things and all the chargers and all the computer parts, and then I realized I forgot my paint. So I have a lovely collection, courtesy of the church, of Crayola and crayons, pastels, watercolor pencils. If anybody wants some of these materials to add color, when we're at that point, you are welcome to come up and get some. Okay, it looks like everybody's got a picture. All right. You can come take a picture right at the source if you want to come look. Here, you can take a picture of this. Try taking a picture of this. I found a very strange blue flower in the woods. All right. Okay. So if this is a little smaller, I'm going to make this a little bigger so you guys can see what I'm up to. I'm just going to move this off of here a little. And it looks like we're going to have this, we're going to have a little bit of a shadow in the way, but that's okay. All right. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just grab a pencil. I'm not going to get fancy, just regular pencil, regular eraser. I don't even have that sharp of a pencil. And I'm going to start to sketch. Now, I do have two different types of paper here. I have watercolor paper. That was when I had watercolor paints to work with. This is a little textured, and the only way to really get that watercolor look is if I go back over it with the watercolor pencils, or I could just use a sketchbook paper, and maybe I'll just do that for now. Oh, I also have markers. I forgot about that. Yeah, I'll do the sketchbook paper for now. Okay, so the very first thing I want to do, I'm going to push a little harder on this just so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm just starting out with this very simple round shape. I learned not to say circle. I probably did say circle once already tonight, but my daughter was asking me for help drawing something, and I said, all right, first draw a circle, and she said, a circle is so hard. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. So I called it a potato. I said, just draw a potato. And we had so much fun drawing potatoes for the head and potatoes for the feet, and it was just an easier shape to, wrap your head around. So now I try to remember that, and instead of circle, think potato. So I'm looking at this one petal that's sort of coming off to this side. One thing that's really important to do when drawing is to kind of forget the thing you're drawing. Just look at the shapes. Try not to let that inner critic say, that doesn't look like a petal. Just say, what does this look like? It looks like it kind of comes down this way. It kind of curves over. I'm not really going to get too fussy with it right now. I'm just going to go on to the next one and sort of look at the width of it, look at the angle, and kind of notice that it comes down, probably the farthest one. I wonder if I'm going to run out of room. I might run out of room. Might need to pull this one up a little. Maybe this one up. I can adjust it later. This is why I started in pencil. I want something that I can edit. And I'm sort of looking at this shape. It's sort of a stubbier shape. I'm not going to call it a petal, just a stubbier shape here. And then this one kind of curves out a little. This one curves as well. And then this one goes all the way over. This one's so lovely. Right over. This nice arc. And then we have one over here. It's a little thinner. As it goes back, it's a little thinner. This one comes up a bit. Here's a really thin one. I have no idea what's exactly happening here. Then I have one that kind of comes to a point. And then I don't really have much happening there. And then there's this lovely long one. Actually, there's three. There's one that kind of, I'm going to start with the bottom one. This one kind of comes out the furthest. This one kind of curves down. And this one does sort of an S curve, which is so lovely. Okay, so when I look at this, oh, I forgot the stem too. I should put the stem in. I think that'll help. When I look at this drawing, the first thing that's very tempting, even with all my drawing experience, the very tempting thing when you take a step back is to say, oh, it doesn't look good. That happens to almost every artist. We always go through that phase of, oh, I didn't nail it on the first try. But what we're doing is a process of big shapes, refining those big shapes, getting it down to the details so that we are correcting as we go. It's not meant to look perfect right now. It's only meant to give us the vague feeling of the shapes that we're looking at. And when I look at this now, I should check for proportion. And one thing I can see it right on the computer, is that the original photograph has a center round clump that is bigger than what I drew. So this is the time to get the eraser out and say, you know what? Either the petals have to get smaller or that has to get bigger. And I think what I want to do is actually make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to erase. And I'm just going to make it a little bigger. And I should say, there was one class where it was an adult that said to me, oh, I erased so much today, I feel like I failed. I was like, no, that's not a failure. That's like editing an email. You type something out, you delete a few lines, you type it out again, you're editing and refining. It's not a failure. It is what artists do, but we don't always see that that's what artists are doing. So if you are making good use of your eraser, that's a very good thing. So I think it's a little bigger. Yeah, I like that proportion a little bit better. Okay, so another thing I like to pay attention to is the light direction. This is for a lot of different art forms that I do. So when you're out in nature, the sun is probably going to shift on you. So if you do take a photo when you first get there and you really like what you're looking at, it'll preserve the shadows the way you like them. But it moves so quickly that in an hour, you could be looking at a totally different light shadow setup. But one thing I like to do is remind myself of the direction of where the light is coming from. So sometimes I just put a little arrow on my paper to say, you know, the light, actually let me put it there, you know, the light is coming from the top left. And that kind of reminds me to keep all of those shadows where they need to go on the back side of that. So that means that some of these petals over here are going to have some shadow, but a lot more on the right and down in the front are going to have shadow too. Okay, so now is a good time to refine what I'm drawing. So I'm going to start with this petal. and kind of go down, and I'm just looking at how it has these little jagged lines here. This perimeter of the petal. This has those little jagged lines. There's even like a little hole torn in the petal. So that's a nice little detail to add that feels authentic, because it is. I'm gonna notice that this comes out and kind of comes around. And then this one also has a little bit of a jagged edge to it. And like I said, this is a little chunkier, so I'm also noticing, and you don't have to do this in any particular order, I'm noticing there's a shadow across here. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a line here, and maybe over here too, of where that shadow is going to be compared to the lighter parts of the petal. I'm going to go over here and come around and sort of get that angle. And I think I could sort of indicate where some of these lines are in the petals too. Actually, I'm going to go back and just sort of put in some of these lines. Now I could count them too. So this one is 1, 2, 3 main lines here. 2, 3. A lot of artists are surprised when there's counting and math involved in the painting process, and a lot of artists do that just to make sure that, you know, we're accurately representing something. You don't have to. You don't have to. But if you are enjoying making something accurate, that can be a part of it. Okay. And come back over here, and this has a little bit of a slant. Kind of curve up in here. Now there's a lovely, it goes from like a spread out petal to like kind of squishing in a bit. So I want to capture that in the drawing. Kind of comes in and it gets a little tight right there. So that's going to be fun to add color to. Then this one back here, actually when I look at that up close, there seems to be something else under here. I'm not sure what I'm looking at, so I'm just going to indicate it a little bit there. And then I see this petal coming out, and there's a little bit of raggedness there. And it looks like another little hole. So this petal has another little window that you can kind of see through. That will be probably easiest to indicate with color. All right. Now this petal coming down. There's another little bit up here. I'm not supposed to be calling them petals, I forgot. I'm gonna move this guy over a little. So this one kind of comes right out here. It almost looks like, I don't know what that is. I guess it's a petal. It almost looks like the center of other flowers though. I'm not sure why that looks that way. So that's an important thing to think about. Like if you're drawing something and you don't understand why it is the way it is, it's important to just draw what you're seeing. Don't overthink it. Our brains really want to help us out with shortcuts a lot of the time, and then the one time it doesn't help us a lot is in drawing. So for example, if you're drawing a person, your brain, my brain, tends to say, oh, a person, I know what a person's face looks like, I've got this. And then I default to like a cartoony little representation of somebody. But if I'm really being honest about what I'm seeing, and my eye is honest, my eye will tell me, this is a wiggly shape, this is a tall shape, this is a squished shape. If I just go by what my eye is feeding me for information, and that my hand is recording it, it will be so much closer to what I'm looking at. So sometimes to get my brain not to override that, the sort of inner critic that's like, I got this, I can take it from here. I listen to a podcast, I have a phone call with a friend, I listen to music, I listen to a documentary. I try to get that part of my brain to think about something else. And then it leaves my eye and my hand to have that conversation about what those shapes are. And that works for me. I don't know that it works for everybody. But whatever works for you to get your eye to give you the information and your hand to record it, that is what you're after. All right, these pieces are so pretty. I'm going to make this petal come down like this lovely S curve. This one comes up a bit. And then this one kind of dips down. Okay, now I have one more petal here. And this one's a little tricky because there's a bit of a bend to it. So I'm going to rely on my eye to give me the angle of this, and then it kind of curls in, and then there's sort of, oh wait, how far down do you go? I think I made it go down too far before. It kind of, the split in the center of it goes up like this, and then there's the other side, and that has a very skinny little shape there. And then we have these shapes here. And like I did with these shadows, I'm noticing there's shadows here. Okay, so now when I look at it, I see the petals are closer, so I refined a little bit, but now I've got this center that looks a little simple. So I want to add the details that I'm looking at. That brings me to another point. I was so tempted to say it doesn't look good, but I didn't say good or bad. I said it looks simple. I found an adjective that describes exactly what is bothering me so that I know what I need to do to fix it. If I said it looks bad, then there's kind of nowhere to go from there. But if I say it looks simple, then, well, okay, some detail could help this. So I encourage other artists, when you're looking at your own work and you're reflecting on it, try your best to think of the precise word that you're looking at and thinking of that might need some help. Good and bad, if you can kind of set them aside, abolish those words while you're drawing, I think that's for the best. Okay, so actually before I draw, the first thing I want to look at is the direction of all those little spiky things in the middle. They're going, it might be a little hard to see up there, so hopefully your phones captured it a little bit better, but they sort of radiate out. So whatever I do, I don't want to make any assumptions and just draw lines. I want to make sure that I've got these radiating spokes out. I'm also noticing a really beautiful sort of spiral curve in like coming from the base of the flower and going up. I did not notice that before. I've looked at this flower a bunch since I took the picture, and I'm just noticing it now. And it reminds me a little bit, I don't know if it's exactly a Fibonacci sequence, but it reminds me of the Fibonacci sequences in like sunflowers. So I'm thinking of that as I look at my own picture. And I want to give myself a guide to some of that. So I'm going to actually start with that curve because I think that's really a cool part of this flower. Now, if I don't successfully draw it, this might be a moment where maybe I could write a note to myself after I do the rest of the details. If it doesn't come out right, I can say, look closer at this. I think there's a Fibonacci pattern here. So I'm just going to start to put some of these in. Now they're in pencil. I'm going to add color to this. But for right now, I just want to make sure I have the directions going the way I want. They're bigger in the front. And toward the top of the flower, they diminish. They kind of get a little compact. So I want to make sure that I do that. And I think about right there, this is where it starts to get all sort of a cluster of these spokes. And actually the whole perimeter of the top of this is just all these spokes coming out. Okay. So looking at that, it has an essence of the photograph. It's not perfect. I think what it's going to take is putting some dark tones and then some of the lighter tones above it. Okay, so at this stage, I think I want to add some color. So if anybody else wants to borrow some art materials that are up here, you are welcome to get some. So come up and don't be shy if you want some. One thing I might do before I add the color, if there's anything I feel that I really want to erase, now would be the time to do it. Sometimes erasing out those marks that are a little bit clumsy or kind of bringing you in a direction that you really didn't want to continue to go in, you know, those are good marks to get rid of. I do like leaving pencil behind. I think seeing the history of what the artist did recorded in the pencil lines, or even when you erase and seeing a little bit of that pencil line still, is quite beautiful. If you ever look at a Degas sketch of a ballerina, you'll often see the foot position change a few times, but it was erased out, but you could still kind of see where it was. So that kind of history of what the artist did is, I think, a beautiful thing. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is, okay, I'm gonna take my pick. Oh, I also have markers. I forgot that. There are markers. Maybe I'll do markers just because it might cover a little bit better. And there are some lovely, bright pink, purple, fuchsia, and there's more than one if anybody else wants other varieties. This kind of goes back to the humble resources that you can bring out with people, with little ones, whatever you want. Would you like some warm colors? You are welcome to. Take whatever you like. It's good to see you, Catherine. There's also watercolor pencils too, if you want some of those. Yeah, take whatever you are interested in. Yeah, that seems like a quintessential color. Yeah, why not? You can also layer the colors too. So I'm looking at the highlights in the flower. Of course, it is looking a little blue there, but in the screen it's more pink. I have a pink and a purple. I think I'm going to layer them to make the areas of the flower that have that color, and then the shadow can be a little bit darker. So like right here might be a good place to start, just putting in some of those colors. My daughter's favorite color is pink, so this is something I think she would enjoy. You can also, depending on what you're working with, you can put this down and then put the other colors on top, even in the dark areas, just to kind of give it a little bit more continuity. It's nice and light right there. So actually, one thing that people often ask me is how to show white or a very light value with limited supplies. Usually it's with watercolor. They're like, how do I paint this white flower? A lot of times you can make that material go lighter, but the other thing that you can do is make the background dark. So actually, right here, I might do that because this part is supposed to be very pale, and there really is dark green behind it. If I put that in, that will help. And actually putting it in between these petals right here, this is going to do a lot to help show the petals. Sometimes it's painting around the object that really can help you too. That's called the negative space, the area around the subject. Okay, so some of this green is looking a little bit pale. So I could mix and match other markers. Another thing I could do, just because we have these tools up here, there's a whole bunch of pastels. And this is another thing, when you're out painting or sketching with your friends or family or whoever you're with, you can just have fun with the mixed media. Okay, this is a deep green. I'm just going to use this and see, with that green marker underneath, I'm not getting any white paper to come through. That's really the nice deep dark value I was hoping for. And so this is really going to help that petal just show up better. I'm going to do it in between here too. Sorry, I'm making the whole table shake and the camera shake. Normally with watercolor it doesn't quite make it this rambunctious, but okay. I just want to look at that for a second. So it accomplished what I hoped it would, which is to let those petals really be distinguished from the background. But now I see a lot of white coming through. So I'm actually going to just grab a little bit lighter green and go over this area just to kind of smush away all the white. Okay. So I can keep doing that throughout the whole picture, but for right now I'm going to go back to concentrating on the flower, and you know, I'm going to go back to the humble pink marker because I think that even though I have some lovely pastels that can go over this, I'm going to lay down the color first with a marker and just get some of this in here. Like right here, it should have been lighter. So I think the pastel is going to come in handy. This is going to need to be in shadow. So now might be a good time to kind of figure out what is that shadow color going to be. Though up there it looks kind of close. I have lavender. I'm just go over that. Oh, that's nice. It gets nice and dark. And then maybe over here, I'm going to indicate a little bit of the shadow. Okay. So when I look, actually there's one more here and maybe one more here. Okay, so I'm going to get out the pale pink. Well, first the regular pink and then the pale pink. And I'm going to go over this area that, oh, this has a little bit of yellow in it. So it actually got a little too yellow. So I'm going to add some white and try to catch that highlight there. A little bit of a highlight up here and here. Okay. This is very mixed media, not my normal, not my normal thing. Okay, so when I look at this, one thing that is missing is the center colors for this ball here. So I want to really observe. I see red and orange and those spiky pieces. I want to get those in before I get some of the dark color in. And actually, maybe I'll do that with a marker just to make it precise. So I'm going to just really try to mimic the strokes I put in before. And even though it's pencil, it's still showing up as orange, nice and bright. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm going out in all directions, which I stopped doing actually. I made a mistake. These guys should be a little different. Okay. And a whole bunch of orange up here. Okay. And then there were little bits of red in there too. And it looks like the red is on top of each one. I don't have to do every single one, just the ones in the front really that I can see. And that might be something I write in my notes too off to the side, like these little stalks have orange with red dots on the top. And then within the dark there, it looks like there's greenish gray. So for precision, I'm going to use a marker just so I don't make a mess. Let's see what they've got for options here. There's a deep blue, there's a purple actually. Maybe I'll go with the purple because it's not black. Sometimes when you use straight black on something, it kind of sucks out the saturation of the colors. So I like to use dark colors that are not entirely black. And this kind of works. And I'm just going around all the orange bits. So sometimes with making art, it's a bit of patience to get all those details in. But like I said, you're really learning about the flower or the specimen that you're looking at, lichen or whatever you're interested in. It takes a little bit. It can be meditative when you're sort of doing this stage of, oh my gosh, I have so much of a thing to do. It can be kind of nice to sit there and just focus on it. And like I said, you could be listening to a podcast, doing something else, talking on the phone. Okay, so I look at what I just drew and I look at the photo, and I could add more orange and I could add more detail, but I think for right now I'm going to let it be and then continue with the pink of the flowers. Although I don't know how we're doing the time. Oh, I guess we're at 8. I should hurry up. We could ask questions while I'm doing this part if you want. You want to do that? Yeah.
So the people on Zoom can hear you.
Oh, I was wondering what the Fibonacci pattern is that you were talking about.
The Fibonacci pattern. So I'm not a mathematician, so I think it's the digit before added to whatever that digit is makes the next number. I know someone in the crowd knows this better than me. I knew someone would know it. It's this pattern that comes up a bunch in nature, and it's so beautifully expressed, especially in sunflowers. You can sort of trace how the center of a sunflower, where the seeds are, they kind of go up in the spiral, and mathematically that is what's happening. It's hard to explain the visual of it, but it's just a beautiful, thank you. It's a visual aid. A visual expression of the mathematics, yeah. It's super fun to look at. There's also something called the golden ratio. It's not quite that, that shows up too in different artistic spaces, and compositionally, artists use that a lot. It's beautiful to notice how much math is involved in art and nature. And that's coming from someone who didn't do too well in all my math classes in school, but now I can really appreciate it. Whenever I teach perspective drawing or anatomy, facial anatomy, things like that, or actually the whole skeleton, there are so many little tips and tricks that rely on math. And it feels like you're cheating a little bit, like you're relying on the numbers. But with perspective, for example, if you trust the math, it doesn't lead you astray. Half the time it's trusting the process is the hard part. So those are fun things to explore. And there's actually a lot of information too online. If you are curious about that, there's a lot of different videos on YouTube that explain it. It's fun to look at. I think my dad said that influenced him when he was younger. That's an old one, right? Yeah, I think he said that influenced him. And there was one, I don't know if it was a line in that or a line in something else that said, mathematics is the language with which God wrote the universe, or some line like that he would mention every once in a while. I'm like, that's actually really poetic and beautiful. But I don't know where it came from originally. But you see it all the time in different things that you want to draw. Okay, so I put a base color down for all the petals, and now I can go back with my lavender and I can start to put in some of these darker areas. That might be a little too dark. I don't know why that got so dark. I feel like the other one wasn't. This one has a little shadow come down like this. If anyone else has any questions, I can answer them while I'm doing this. Okay, thank you. With the Princeton program, we always joke that there's always a question about the pencil. Everyone always is like, what pencil do you use? And it's a good question. It's just the one we always get. When I draw in any kind of demo, I use an 8B, which is a very soft graphite, just so people can see what I'm doing. If it was any harder of a graphite, it just would not show up very well. But any pencil, any tool is fine. There's one art student that went outside and got a stick and dips the stick in ink and draws with that, and it's gorgeous. And we always joke that she should sell the sticks that she finds and turns into art materials. So you can do this with anything. So it's probably something I picked up when I was learning a lot of art technique from teachers. So, but I do agree with it. There's two things happening when you go dark. You're looking for a very dark value. You're looking for something that can hold, this really dark tone against other lighter colors. But you're also looking at saturation. So black is no saturation. If you add like purples and blues into the black, if you have a paint you can mix and you can add some of those tones in there, or even reds, it just makes a richer dark. So I'm a fan of that. There's nothing wrong with using straight black out of a tube. There's no art police, even though it does seem like sometimes there's rules. But I just think it is worthwhile to think about, like, is this something I could have like a really rich tone in here, or is the whole piece sort of desaturated? So maybe that's not what you want. Maybe the whole piece is sort of grayscale. So that's fine, All right, I'm going to put in green throughout. Get some of this to pop a little bit more. That's yes. Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Sometimes I have trouble seeing the object, and so sometimes I do look at the negative space. So like that little wedge between the petals, I think, oh, did it come to a point, or is it wide? And so I kind of measure in reverse in a way. Absolutely. Absolutely do that. You can do whatever makes it easier for you to understand the image. And like I said, a lot of times artists that do render work on a regular basis do these techniques, but you don't see it because oftentimes you see on the wall the finished work, and so there's no description of what the process was, or it took them this long, or they ripped up 5 versions of this earlier, whatever it was. So it is hard to decode it. That's actually why I really do enjoy seeing what artists put online for techniques. The only drawback with that is that sometimes if you get someone that has like a sped up video, it gives the impression that there is so much knowledge in the brain of that artist that they just knew right from the beginning like what every mark was going to be. If you were to slow it down in real time, there's a lot of pausing, there's a lot of thinking, there's erasing, but it doesn't always show up in a sped up video. So just know that that is part of that process too, if you're watching any videos online. Okay, I'm just putting this base color underneath, and then I'm going to add some of the other pastels. Now I have some really bold color pastels here, so I might have to mix a few things, but work really quickly. And if anyone else has any questions, I will happily answer.
Okay, working just with pencil, not with color, it feels like there are places where it would be really useful to have a couple of highlights, but you just have to.
I'm having trouble hearing. I'm so sorry. If you're working with pencil, no, I know the microphone isn't working. So you're saying you're working with pencil, and so the whole part about
It would be useful to have a couple of highlights, but of course the pencil is only dark. So do you just have to color it all in and then erase it?
That's a technique you can do, definitely. Sometimes when I'm doing a graphite only picture, I will smudge the whole paper first, and then I'll use, actually I have it up here. There's like an eraser pencil. You can get this at Blick or I think Staples. Basically, you can sort of see this long stick of an eraser. You can actually take an X-Acto knife and get a very fine point to it if you want. You can erase out details, which can be really beautiful for a delicate highlight on something. That's really nice. But you could absolutely subtract. It's a subtractive method of erasing out and then build up other values too. There's something a little easier about grayscale pictures because you're only dealing with the values of light, middle, and dark. When you add color, it's just another thing to juggle. So it can be a little bit more. Does anybody, actually, I'm not done with mine, but does anybody want to show their work? That might be kind of fun. Yeah? If you want to, so our Zoom people can see, they can bring them up here, right? And put them on, if you're brave and want to do it. Oh, that's so beautiful. That is really lovely. I really enjoy the texture in here, and I love the shading and just the unique quality of the petals. They're really nice. It's really nice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, the colors were too intimidating.
That's okay. I'm so glad you guys are sharing. This makes me happy. Let's take a look. Ooh, wow. Look at that center. Wow.
Okay, so like one of these petals.
The petals have such character.
It's this one here that has a real bright highlight.
Yeah.
So okay, after you said that, I tried to smudge this and then.
But you need the component of the dark here. The problem is though, once you go darker here, then you're going to need to go darker here everywhere else. Like once you go darker.
These things have real bright things at the top.
So this is that pencil eraser I was talking about. So you could smudge the whole thing and then pull out little bits if you want. But yeah, this is a good tool for that. But you did a great job. It is really nice. I'm impressed. Both of those are really lovely. Oh, lovely. Oh, I love the center on that one too. Everyone really got into the centers and made them so gorgeous. This is so nice. I love how it has this spin to it. It really has a nice motion. Really, really beautiful. This is, I think, my favorite, where this petal kind of comes down and this one goes up and this S curve. Those are just beautiful. Nice job. Really nice job. Anyone else? I know there's some brave souls in there that might want to share. Yay. Let's see. Oh, color. Oh, that's awesome. That's so pretty. Oh, I love how you designed that. That is just lovely. And this is wonderful. You got the light right on that petal, and I can see the shadow there and the highlight there. That's so great. And your notes, I like seeing all that. And also over here, just like a little testing of the color, just kind of seeing, what is it that's going to go down on the final drawing? What does that look like? And testing it out over here. That was smart.
Do you ever erase the pencil after that?
Well,
Mixed feelings.
It depends on the artist. So if you are doing, let's say if you're painting in watercolor and you put pencil down first, it's not easy to erase afterwards. So one thing you can do is you can use a watercolor pencil and you can sketch in watercolor pencil. And then when you go to add the watercolor, you can lift those lines if you don't like them anymore. And you can pick the colors that relate to your picture. So if it's a portrait and you want like an earthy warm tone, that might make sense. If you're doing a landscape, it might be a green pencil, and then you can lift the color. And then if you don't want to see pencil lines, you won't. I like seeing the pencil lines though. I really enjoy that part.
Okay.
I think this is beautiful. Really nice. Anyone else? All right, well, I think I'm going to leave mine there, even though it's really not finished. I'll finish it up maybe at home in watercolor for you guys. Actually, Alexandra, you brought these to mention. Do you want to talk about this, the cards? The cards, yeah. 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 Yeah, I think that's a cool thing to do. So I'll go home and I'll make this in watercolor for you, and I'll give it to you guys. Any other questions? No? I'm so glad you guys came out tonight to draw. I hope, if nothing else, you were able to kind of relax a little, enjoy the creative process, and feel confident if you go out with your family, friends, little ones, loved ones, whoever, and draw in nature. Thank you.